We are going to dive across to the NFC East, starting with the Washington franchise, still refusing to use that name, the Commanders. Tom, a fairly crazy year. We had 3 quarterbacks. Do you think any of them have got any sort of value looking ahead to next year?
It was really strange. We saw Carson Wentz come out firing, over those first few games. I think he had 27 points in back-to-back up games to open the season. And then he only had one above 20 for the rest of the season, which is much more like the Carson Wentz we know. But yeah, in those first couple of games, I was a little bit afraid that I'd gotten things completely wrong on Carson Wentz coming into the season. But this was not a good season for Wentz. He was 31st in DVOA, behind the likes of Russell Wilson and Davis Mills. He had 9 interceptions in just 8 games. This is the Carson Wentz that we know these days. There has to be no way back for him. They can't want to pay him. Carson Wentz isn't going to take a pay cut. And they just, Washington as a team need a fresh start from him. Taylor Heineke isn't the answer. He's a good bridge quarterback. He could be the kind of quarterback that you can keep around if you're going to have a rookie there. As for Sam Howell, we didn't really see enough, did we? 1 week 18 game. He held his own against the Cowboys, but it just really wasn't enough to be able to say this a quarterback that we can build around going forward. And obviously the team didn't really believe in him. Otherwise we would have seen him before then.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it screams of let's get rid of Carson Wentz. If Taylor Heineke goes, Taylor Heineke goes. Let's bring in a new option, whether that's, trading up in the draft, going and getting someone in the draft, or one of these potential veteran free agents that's floating around. I think it's screaming for bring somebody new in, shall we say. Looking across the wide receiver position, as much as we had a lot of flux at the quarterback position, there was 2 good performances this year. Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, is there one that you'd rather own for Dynasty moving forward?
In Dynasty, it's really difficult to move Terry McLaurin. We've got a league we're in together, which I won this year, and I had Terry McLaurin on my roster, and all season I was trying to trade him. He was on the trade block. I was sending out offers. I was really aggressive with it, but nobody wants to buy Terry McLaurin, and it's really difficult to move him. He was wide receiver 27 in points per game, which is a little bit disappointing. He finished at 47th out of wide receivers with 57, with 50 catches or more in terms of catch rate. He had, it wasn't good for him. There were points where he flashed and then points where it was really difficult, but I find that difficult to kind of stay in on for 2023. Jahan Dotson, again, he flashed. He had the 2nd most deep targets amongst rookies, 5th most targets per game amongst rookies. And I think there'll be quite a bit of hype for him coming into 2023, depending on what happens at quarterback.
Yeah, it feels like Terry McLaurin is an incredibly talented wide receiver, but because of the situation he's found himself in with quarterbacks and things, he's never produced for fantasy. And I think basically every year you can go into the season and almost guarantee that Terry McLaurin is going to be overdrafted, going to be overvalued, and produces like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. As for Jahan Dotson, you're talking about the hype. I think there's not enough hype on Jahan Dotson. Like he was the rookie wide receiver 4 in terms of production. He had a very similar season to Christian Watson, and yet you look in startups now, he's going behind, obviously, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Drake London, Treylon Burks, George Pickens, Jameson Williams, Christian Watson. Like, he's the rookie wide receiver, 7-8 in drafts at the moment. I really think there is some good value to be had in going and acquiring Jahan Dotson at the moment. Looking across at the running back position, obviously, we've, horrific situation to start the season with Brian Robinson. Antonio Gibson flashed some, but it felt like both of them being in the backfield kind of cannibalized each other, and they both ended up as basically boring week-to-week flex plays and not much more. Are you wanting to invest in either looking ahead to next year?
Not really at the minute. Like you said, they kind of cannibalized each other. There was only 100-yard performance from either of them this year. Neither of them had a Duke rate in the top 75 running backs this season. They just weren't getting open. They weren't explosive. Gibson's clearly not somebody that they trust a lot, but maybe with a different coaching staff that could change. He did have the 14th most targets amongst running backs this season, so that kind of kept his value afloat. And Brian Robinson, yeah, he looked like a guy who was recovering from injury, and maybe he gets going more in his 2nd year, but there's just so many question marks with this team and with this offense that it's just really difficult for me to want to buy any pieces of him, maybe outside of Jahan Dotson or Terry McLaurin on a win now team.
And you touched on perhaps the elephant in the room there. The franchise is going through some change. Looks like Ron Rivera is going to be in post for another year. Scott Turner's seems to be the one that's caught the flack and has been fired. What are you expecting from the entire franchise potentially over the next 12 months?
This is a franchise that just needs a complete deep clean. I mean, it just we can't get any more simple than that. Dan Snyder needs to be gone, and that seems like it's eventually going to happen for far more than he deserves to sell the team for. And good for the fans. But Ron Rivera probably should be sacked as well. We've seen his kind of ceiling. He's been a great stabilizing force for this team, a real good person for the team to have in there. But he's not elevating the team. I don't think that Scott Turner was to blame for the offensive issues this year. And really, I think if new owners come in, the best thing they can do would be to hire a new GM, hire a new head coach, and really just start from scratch.